Hey, welcome to Radicalize Me. This side poofed a lot more than this one today. You never know what you're going to get with curly hair. So this video is going to be a response to a long tweet from Hank Green. Hank is, of course, one of the Vlog brothers. I actually like some of Hank's work. I've always had points of disagreement with him politically, but I'm not trying to attack him. I'm just calling out what I think is a harmful attitude in modern politics, which is what he's doing too, and he has every right to. So let's get into it. We will be reading through the whole post, just not all at once. I'll respond as we go through it.
I think a harm of online activism is the "this is actually easy" argument.
Already, I think there's a problem here. Maybe someone really says this is actually easy, but more often the left is saying this is not complicated in response to liberals insisting that it is, whatever the issue at hand may be. And at least in my experience, liberals interpret this is not complicated as this is actually easy. Consider Israel and Palestine. Liberals love to say this issue is complicated. Both sides have done bad things. Both have a claim to the land. We should have a two-state solution, but it's so complicated to do it. Here's the thing. If you want to say the details of the history are complicated, or the logistics of actually implementing a solution are complicated, even if both sides agree to it, fine. No one's arguing that this would all be done with a magic wand. But the point is that the problem is not nearly as complicated as you've been told. The right and wrong here is just not that hard. Palestine and Israel have both attacked each other a lot, but Israel has broken more ceasefires and killed more Palestinians than the other way around, and it's not even close. Israel is the settler colony, and Palestinians are the occupied people. Israel is an apartheid state with different rules for Palestinians than for Israelis. They have a blockade against the largest concentration camp in the world called Gaza, and Israel allows thousands of illegal settlers in the West Bank, which is supposed to belong to Palestine. Israel is a nuclear power and has the backing of the US, and Palestine essentially has nothing. There's no comparison. But liberals want you to think the solution is complicated because the problem is complicated. So it's going to take a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer to fix it. And they assume that all parties want to fix it. I promise you, Israel and the US and the weapons manufacturers in each are not dying to solve this problem.
I've seen lots of people indicate that a single billionaire could solve homelessness, or that there are 30 times more houses than homeless people, so we could just give them all houses. These words are fantastic for activating people, but they're also lies. The U.S. government currently spends around $50 billion per year keeping people housed. States, of course, have their own budgets. If Bill Gates spent the same amount of money the U.S. does just to keep people housed, he'd be out of money in 3 years. I think that would be a great use of his money, but it would not be a permanent solution.
I think he's actually right about the Bill Gates thing. Although, since most of his wealth is probably in shares of Microsoft, who knows if he could even cash all of that out? Even if he did it a little at a time, I'm not sure if that would boost or crash the stock. But sure, regardless, not a permanent solution. But I'm struggling with the 50 billion number. I'm not sure where he got that, and it's actually on the very low end of the numbers I'm seeing. There does seem to be a lot of variation between sources, but I'm betting this is more due to corrections made over time and some ambiguity in what federal housing spending actually counts as housing assistance. I found a report from the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, which is a research institute, which says the Fed spent $90 billion on housing assistance in 2021, and that this was a 70% increase over the previous year, which puts 2020 at around $63 billion, which is closer to Hank's number. But I also found this report from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which says we spent $190 billion in 2015, which is $100 billion more than the other number if you're following along at home. But this is what I mean. I think different sources on this are just making judgment calls on what does and doesn't count as housing assistance. Keep in mind that Trump made some significant cuts to housing assistance, but not $130 billion, so who knows? But my point is that however much money it is, it's not getting to where it needs to go. The title of that CBPP article I'm pulling from is federal housing spending is poorly matched to need. They write,
federal housing expenditures favor higher income households. The 7 million households with incomes of $200,000 or more receive a larger share of such spending than the more than 50 million households with incomes of $50,000 or less, even though lower income families are more likely to struggle to afford housing.
So while the federal government spends even more than Hank said they do on housing, most of that goes to tax benefits for higher income homeowners. There's just not enough going to actual housing assistance, public housing, or even the stupid Section 8 vouchers. We literally have the programs in place, and while I'm not going to say it's just an easy one-step fix, a huge part of the solution is just spending the goddamn money. Moving the existing budget around, negotiating more spending into a bill. There are ways to do it. Every study where a government simply puts homeless people into housing units with no eligibility requirements works. Every basic income study works. The subjects don't sit around jerking off and doing heroin all day. They use the boost to get their lives back on track.
The statistics about there being more houses than homeless are just fake. They rely on looking at extremely low estimates of homelessness, which are never used in any other context, and include normal vacancy rates. An apartment is counted as vacant even if it's only vacant for a month, while the landlord is finding a new tenant. In a country with 150 million housing units, a 2% vacancy rate is 3 million units, which, yes, is greater than the homeless population, but a 2% vacancy rate is extremely low, and bad because it means there's fewer available units than there are people looking to move, which drives the price of rent even higher.
As far as I know, this is mostly true. It's hard to get an accurate count of available housing units because of what he's saying here. So yeah, don't take meme statistics at face value.
Housing should not be an option in this country. It should be something we spend tons of money on. It should be a priority for every leader and every citizen. It should also be interfaced with real complex ways. And it should be remembered that the main way we solve the problem is building more housing, which I find a whole lot of my peers in seemingly progressive spaces are actually opposed to. Sometimes they are opposed to it because they've heard stats that the problem is simple and could be solved very easily if only we would just decide to solve it, which is doing real damage.
I'm not sure what he's talking about here, and side note, I still don't really understand what a progressive is supposed to be, but my understanding of the leftist or socialist position is that when we need housing, government should fucking build housing and make it universally available at cost. If you don't think that would work, then I need you to go watch this video about Vienna's public housing program. Since he doesn't specify the circumstances in which the left is opposed to building housing, I'm guessing he's referring to the fact that we don't think deregulation and luxury apartment developments or swaths of single-family homes are the way to solve this. In which case, yeah, we're right. Luxury developments spike rental prices, and even when they're required to include a number of low-income units, they often find loopholes or the measure gets completely shut down by NIMBYs. Maybe Hank is doing some projection here because build more housing is kind of an oversimplified way to present this issue.
By telling the simplest version of the story, you can get people riled up, but what do you do with that once they're riled up if they were riled up by lies? There are only two paths. Number one, tell them the truth, that everything they've been told is actually a lie, and that the problem is actually hard. And because the problem is both big and hard, tons of people are working very hard on it, and they should be grateful for, or even become, one of those people. Number two, keep lying until they are convinced that the problem does not exist because it is hard. It exists because people are evil. Or, I guess number three, people could just be angry and sad all the time, which is also not great for affecting real change.
Okay, so number one, everything you've been told is a lie is another exaggeration he makes here that I don't think is helpful or accurate. And while I agree that there are people throughout government, nonprofits, and the charity world who work very hard on behalf of homeless people and even get some of them housed, the fact is that much of the work they do is not designed to end homelessness, but to put a Band-Aid on it, or maybe chip away at the edges of the problem if you're lucky. It's nothing against the people doing this work. It's just that bourgeois government NGOs, and charity work are the only options presented to us in a capitalist society, especially capitalism with American characteristics. And capitalism has no interest in ending homelessness. Number two, while I don't find the term evil particularly useful, I think it's wrong to say that the problem exists because it is hard. The problem may be hard, but it exists because our system treats housing as a commodity and investment vehicle rather than fucking shelter. And the people and other entities who benefit from that system work very hard and spend a lot of money to keep it the way it is. And I'd love to see Hank have the same amount of smoke for the housing profiteers that he does for well-meaning, if goofy people on Twitter. The fact is, to solve problems of human misery like homelessness, at some point, you have to do things that upset these powerful people and institutions who benefit from jacking up housing prices. I make no secret of the fact that I would like to abolish capitalism, and it's worth noting that past and current socialist experiments like China, Cuba, and the USSR severely reduced or virtually ended homelessness, but even places which have not gone this far have made massive strides. I mentioned Vienna before. Austria is not exactly communist. Finland, the Netherlands, Utah, it can be done, and it's being done right now. And that's not to say it's easy or simple, it's to say we should do it. And we should start by correctly identifying the root of the problem. Speaking of which, Hank ends this tweet with one of my most hated political sentiments.
We do not have any big, easy problems. If we did, they'd be solved. I'm sorry. It's a bummer. But here we are.
This is a lazy, uncritical, thought-terminating cliche. If it was easy, we would have solved it. No. Like I said before, there are competing interests in society, and some of them don't want to solve problems like homelessness. More public housing might force corporate landlords to lower their rents or spend more money improving their properties. Billionaires, CEOs, and investors don't like that because in an increasingly financialized economy like ours, every company's job is not only to do whatever they can to keep increasing the rate of profit, which has a tendency to fall, by the way, but to keep stock prices climbing at all costs. If they can do that by dumping money into throwing up a bunch of high-rises with inflated rents, that's what they'll do. And they won't be too keen on competing with publicly owned land and housing complexes, so if they have to buy off the city council and the state house to prevent those, they'll do that too. Please, if you never learn anything else from me, internalize the idea that there are people in society who are incentivized to keep good things from happening. We don't all want the same things. So those of us who do should be coming together to fight the ones who don't. That involves creating a new system that excludes those incentives. We'll never get anywhere just playing around in the sandbox that the ruling class has built for us. Thanks for watching. If you like what we do here, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help keep the channel going, you can help us out over on Patreon. Bye now.